Welcome. I'm Lee Lamb. I'm founder of Your Startup Partner and of Advisor in Your Pocket. I work solely with startups on their business strategy from the external side of going out to market to the operational side of making sure that once they've got the demand, that they can actually service it correctly. So growing and scaling a business, right, the thing that I talk about the most. So we're going to cover four things today: what growth means and how to connect it with ambition, because they're two different things; unintentional versus intentional growth; 3 steps to an agile strategy, and I will explain what an agile strategy is; and the danger of success, because I think we spend so much time wondering if what we're going to do works that we forget that if it does work, we've also got to do something about that. So the whole point of starting a business is to grow, but I would say that for a lot of people, that definition is different, depending on what it is they want to get out of it. For some, you might be a founder who dreams of, billion-dollar deals, Ferraris, cover of Forbes, competing with Elon Musk on sending people to Mars. That's great. But there is just as much founders out there who want to create a business more as a legacy for their family, to provide a good retirement, and would be seen as far more modest. Both of the dreams are valid, but they're not really talking about growing the business. They're talking more about what they perceive as success. And they're two very different things. So company needs to do more than just survive. Even if you just want to stay relatively small, you still have to adapt and grow to what the marketplace is going to allow you to do. But you can be a business owner who gets all of that right and provides amazing growth and has, on the face of it, a very successful business, but not feel very successful. Equally, you can have a business that by most people's standards is quite modest, but you can be extremely proud and feel that you have really, really achieved something. There's no rhyme or reason to the definition of that success, because it's an intensely personal definition. It can be connected to money, status, connections, or simply just being your own boss. How you define success in your life is down to you as an individual and your starting point and the experiences you've had along the way. And different things matter to different people. So why does this affect your growth strategy? Because the interlink between how ambitious you are and what you and the potential of your company is determined by putting the two together, and the way that you grow your business will change. So if we look through at this, it's a bit of a chart, because there are effectively 4 ways that this happens. So let's start with, say the company idea you have has really high potential, but you have very modest ambitions. You're not looking to change the world, but you've got an idea that could. You're going to grow for acquisition. So from the very beginning, you need to be growing your company ready to package it up and move it to someone else. Because what you're effectively going to be doing is demonstrating the potential of the company, not realizing it. So then what happens if you've got a company, you've got low ambition and low potential? So it's never going to be huge, and you're fine with that. You are going to grow, but you're going to grow your business towards a turnover target. So instead of trying to make excessive, you're going to have a number in mind and think, if I achieve that every year, I'm good. That's where I want to be. These are typically referred to as lifestyle businesses. It's not ever going to look that much bigger than just you, but that's fine. And it's just as legitimate as a company that wants to get massively bigger. The other extreme of that is when you've got a high potential idea and high ambition, and that's when you're growing for the highest potential possible. So that's the one that I think the majority of advice out there assumes this box. It assumes that the idea can go worldwide and global, but also that you are the one who wants to get it there. And so most of the advice is there. Now, it's only 1 box on 4. So this is why I personally think a lot of the advice out there misses the mark, because it's only actually talking to a quarter of the people that are growing the businesses. Lastly, we have a lot of ambition, but the idea for your business isn't going to have that huge amount of potential. So what you're doing here is you're growing a business as far as it will go. But what you might find is you become a multi entrepreneur, right? You're not satisfied with one because it doesn't achieve what your ambition wants you to. So you're growing in order to invest in the next one, invest in the next one. So once you know which box you are, then you can look at, okay, so what's the other factors that come into growing your business? And we like to think that's all under our control, but very rarely is it completely. And what it boils down to is there are actually two ways of growing a business, unintentionally and intentionally. And I'll explain what I mean by both, because unintentional growth sounds a bit strange. So unintentional growth is where you have people who say, oh, I'm thinking of running a business. And before they've even thought of a business name, they've got customers, right? Because people around them automatically see the value of what they can offer. They suddenly get a huge amount of demand without really having to try that hard. Obviously, there is that second group, and that makes up a larger proportion of people who want to have a business, but have to do a lot more pushing it out to the world. But unintentional growth is one of the options. My clients are made up of both. I've got clients who have got in contact with me purely because they've started to grow without doing anything and they're not quite sure what to do. So when does this happen? It happens when they're in a familiar sector, so they know their stuff already. They are familiar, so they've built up a really good connection and network within that area. So people already know their credentials, they already know that they can do the job well, and that the problem is familiar. So obviously, all of these are connected to the fact that if you have a business that you already know a lot about, and other people know that you know a lot about, then you're not going to have as many issues finding customers. In fact, 9 times out of 10, business owners in this category have people urging them to start their own business because of how much value they could have in the marketplace. I've had, so a couple of examples would be, I had 2 media companies. One was media content marketing and another one was digital marketing. And both of them were people who had done a lot of work on growing their network within their industry. So when they then went out to market, they already had customers. One of them had 3 years of multi-million-pound turnover before they ever did any marketing because their network was so good. The other one was very much one-on-one. So the growth was steadier, but it was just as prolific. They were able to get 2 or 3 years worth of demand out of contacts that they'd made on their way towards making the decision to have a business. So it all happened even before the decision was made. There are a number of consequences if you grow in this way. So the first thing is you have no time to build anything. So this is very much like, what do I need to use straight away? This doesn't typically cause a problem because we've got the demand coming in. So we can throw resources at it and we can figure it out quickly. The problem from an operational side is you want everything to fit together neatly. And when we're just in the process of reacting to demand, we haven't got time to think things through. So we're not building something that's particularly strong. We're just building something that works with what we have at the moment. The second one is no time for marketing. So like I said, both of those companies had no marketing going on. Now, that wasn't a problem while their network were in the right places for decision making. Were able to put them and recommend them further. But what both found is eventually that network runs dry. If you don't nurture it, if you don't keep adding to it with other people, those people kind of run out of ways to help you. And one managed to navigate it far better than the other, partly because it's really difficult to start marketing when you've already had that level of success. It feels strange to have to go out there and ask people to work with you. And that it was really, really difficult to get my clients to understand the benefit of that, as opposed to more of a sales approach, which is pick up the phone to your friends and just bug them until they give you something. So it doesn't always help. Plus, marketing is not a short-term strategy. It takes between 6 to 9 months for marketing to really embed. So if you run out of contacts before you start looking at the marketing, you're going to have a 6 to 9 month pipeline issue. And both of them actually ended up having that. The other thing is obviously complacency. Like it came so easy. When there are the problems occurring, they don't know how to deal with them, because we tend to think that overnight success is a good thing. And actually it isn't, because sometimes it's the process of figuring things out in a more difficult environment that helps us understand what resources we need, what skills we need. And so what happens is they never think it'll happen to them until it does. And then they can't quite get their head around what to do about it. Now, normally when I use the term unintentional growth, one of the things that people will ask is around going viral. So obviously in a social media era, we think of going viral as like the best thing for a business. In actual fact, it can be one of the worst things, primarily because of these three things, in particular, number one. So I had a client who inadvertently had a customer who was quite a big Instagram influencer. Typically, she didn't know that until she saw a post later that day, and she phoned me up when she was getting 10,000 extra followers per hour for the rest of that night. It sounds amazing. It sounds like the thing that dreams are made of. But having 50, 60,000 people suddenly want to book a call with you or book your service, you can't get to everyone that quickly. And she called me because she started panicking. What we had to do was manage the comms, because when you go viral, particularly as a business, there's an assumption that you're ready for it. So the general public are now seeing you, they assume that you've done all the background work to make sure that you can handle the demand. Now, in reality, you probably haven't, because you didn't want to invest in something if it didn't happen, or it just caught you completely unawares. So you've got this issue with how much you can actually service the demand with that coming in. And going viral is such a fleeting way to get growth that you've got maybe a 24, 48-hour window. So you haven't got time to hold them off for too long. Now, you can use going viral and a social media strategy as part of growing, but it can't be the only thing, because it's so temporary, and because it inadvertently causes these three problems, it causes you more issues than it solves. So the next thing is intentional. So this is where most of the rest of us are, right? So if the last scenario sounds like a bit of a fever dream, then the chances are you're in the second group. So you want to grow your business, but you don't have that visibility yet. You don't have the contacts, and you may be doing okay, but you're not going any further. Now, the best thing is to look at what happens when it happens unintentionally and use those as the best way of growing your business with a bit more effort. So the first thing, build your knowledge of your sector. So this isn't just about, I see it from a consumer point of view, or I've heard of what the problems are. Really dig into the detail. So I've still got a client who had to pivot her business over the last 18 months. And one of the things that she got really interested in was AI. And she recognized that AI was coming, and there was a gap within the knowledge base of very highly technical people over here and everyone else over here who would love to use it but didn't know how. And so she spotted this gap. She wasn't technical, so she had to really dig into the sector to figure it out, but she was a business owner. And so she used the knowledge she had to understand how to give herself the knowledge coming through from the tech. And so she now has a platform called AI for Non-Techies, which is all about training people who are scared of technology about AI, and particularly with the business focus. So building that knowledge didn't happen overnight. She spends about 3 hours a day on training programs, talking to other members of the AI community. She does the work. So read the books, listen to the podcast, make sure that even if you're relatively new to the sector, that you know the latest trends that are going on in that space, so that nothing catches you unawares. And as you're reaching out to people, they get the sense that you do know what you're talking about, which is the familiarity. The second thing is networking. So networking anyway for a founder is absolutely critical. But if you don't already know people in this space, you absolutely have to go out looking for them. So this isn't about being everywhere. It's about being in the right room with the right people. So focus on having a few key events or communities that have the people in that you want to build your connections to. Now, notice I'm not saying sales targets or leads. I'm talking about connections, because your network, you don't sell to your network. You build the relationship with the network, who then go out and do the selling for you. So building up your profile, going out there, putting yourself in that space so that people know, like, and trust. And this is my favorite one. This is where I show my age, because I talk about the Sinclair C5. You have to solve a problem that actually exists. So I have this quite a bit when I talk to inventors. They are very excited about what they've created. And when I say to them, where's the market research? Where's the customer's demand for this? They sort of look at me and go, but it's really cool. It's like, yes, it is. But to make it a business, it has to have a customer base, and the customers know what problems they have. So particularly if you're having to create a strategy to move into a sector and make space for yourself, you have to make sure that you're solving something that already exists in there. You can't create a problem, particularly when the sector doesn't really know how much experience or information you have about them. And you don't want to invest in trying to market something that just doesn't have any value to them. So let's try to think about, now we know kind of what kind of business aims you're going to have, and also, where are you? Are you someone who's going to fall and trip into success, or are you going to be someone who's going to have to think more strategically? And I just wanted to quickly cover that the reason I do strategy rather than business planning. For me, a business plan is a document that takes you through almost the entire life cycle of your business. So it gets you to think of every single little detail. And at the beginning, many founders really struggle to complete their business plan because they don't know enough about what running a business is going to feel like to be able to answer the questions. So they get the 30, 40 page template off the internet, they get to page 1, and then they completely give it up because the first question they can't answer. For me, business plans are reducing in importance because they're not really used that much. They're used when talking to investors. They're used if going for things like grants or public sector work. They're not really used by anyone else. And what we can do is put a lot of founders off by getting them to create this tome, which then goes neatly into a drawer and never gets looked at. Strategy it offers the same kind of value, but in real time. So for me, strategy is know where you're going, but understand that it's a process, it's a journey. So the analogy I use is a business plan is like your A to Z at home, strategy is your sat nav. So you plug in the destination and it automatically adjusts as and when challenges come up. That's what you need to be doing now. The last 5 years in particular, with the lockdowns and pandemic kind of throwing everything up in the air, has meant that plans change really quickly, and you can't necessarily stick to a rigid plan anymore. So it's a skill to be able to think strategically. Now, Agile strategy has essentially 3 steps, which I recommend to my clients they do on at least a weekly basis. So this is not a one-off exercise at all. It is a way of thinking. First thing, where do you want to go? Now, you might have a really clear idea at the beginning of your journey where it is you want to reach to. Out of those 4 boxes, you might have a really good idea of which one you are. But as you go through, things change. Someone who thinks that they've actually got quite low ambition may find that as they start getting more and more success, they quite like it. They think they can go further. They now have more self-belief. And so we don't just set a goal and leave it where it is. We should constantly monitor that we still want the same thing. I've spoken to founders who, on the face of it, have a successful business, and just something about them, they're not happy. And when you dig into it, it's because the business that they thought they were growing is not the business that they now have. And so while they understand externally it looks great, internally that itch has never been fully scratched. And so giving yourself permission to change where you're heading is really, really important. The second thing is, are your current activities the way you're going to get there? Now, it is extremely easy to get distracted. We all have one-to-ones with people. We start talking about collaboration, and all of a sudden there's new products and new services and new ways of working. The reason we have to go through these considerations all the time is because those distractions can take us far further off course. So we can have a year, maybe 2, of doing something that actually, if we asked ourselves these questions, aren't going to help us at all with going in the direction that we want to go in. So just double check that it's okay to do mini projects. It's okay to make those changes, but ask yourself, is it a permanent change? i.e., have I changed where I want to go because I now like doing this stuff? Or is it a temporary solution to maybe generating an extra bit of revenue, or just something that is quite self-contained? But be honest with yourself as to whether you're really working on the right things. And then if you're not, what needs to change? So think of these as like your traffic lights. The red is where do you want to go? The amber is, are you doing the right things? And the green is, if not, where are we going differently? What needs to change within our mindset? Because with all of these 3, you'll constantly readjust, a bit like your sat nav. You'll be able to understand, am I growing in the right way? And am I going in the right direction? If you hit a roadblock, if you hit a challenge, you have to figure out, is it worth sticking the course and waiting here and seeing it through? Or do I need to change course because actually what I'm trying to achieve is no longer the thing that really kind of lights me up? So when we talk about putting together a strategy, we're using these 3 all the time. So rather than think of it as a one-off operation that you do maybe once a year, constantly look for the growth. Also, I had 25 years in corporate where I was told time and time again to have SMART goals, to the point where I get quite triggered by SMART goals now. SMART is not appropriate in this scenario, because we will not grow any quicker by keeping realistic and achievable. Right? When you're trying to build a business, by definition, you're creating something that doesn't exist right now. And you can give yourself permission to think of the big dreams. There's that quote that says, shoot for the moon. Even if you don't reach there, you end up in the stars. What we do know about growing is if you grow forwards, so if you look at where you are now and increase by 10%, yes, you will grow, but it will be very incremental and very slow. when we set ourselves a more audacious, ambitious target 1 or 2 years in the future, we find ourselves taking slightly larger risks, slightly larger kind of leaps of faith, and we get further. So where do you want to go does not have to be what is realistic and achievable now. It just has to be what you're shooting for all the time. So the last thing, what if that works? So when we start, we're not convinced that everything's going to work. We might have a self-belief. We might think that we have the ability, but we know the economy and the marketplace ultimately decides. But what if it does start working? We can spend a long time trying to figure out how things might fail and not be ready for when it works. So when you start getting that demand, when that momentum starts building up, and you start thinking, well, this is starting to get a speed where it doesn't feel comfortable anymore, what do you do then? So from an operational perspective, these are the 3 C's of dealing with growth. So this is once you're in motion. First, customer journey. So this really you should do straight away. Customer journey is your end-to-end process. How do people find you, and how do you make sure that they stay around as loyal customers, and everything in between. Now, when you do that exercise, if you are struggling to figure out how they go from one stage to the next, that is an operational gap. And that gap will get bigger the more people come along. So do your customer journey and make sure that your end-to-end process is completely end-to-end. The next is comms. As your customer base increases, so does your need to figure out a way to communicate with them. One-to-one phone calls, one-to-one emails may not be possible once you're dealing with a number of customers at any one time. As you're growing, you are likely to have things happen like delays, or you might have complications and escalations. You may make mistakes because the volume's more, the likelihood of mistakes goes up. Customers know that things happen, but they also expect you to deal with them professionally and quickly. And if you don't talk to them at all, they take that as your communication. So make sure that before the customer starts assuming they know what's going on, tell them. We have a scenario now where customers, because of social media, are okay about being in on it. They don't mind knowing that you're having difficulties or there's a challenge, as long as you talk about it. 2 of the biggest ones that I can think of is Wonky Coffee. So Wonky Coffee used to be called the Odd Coffee Company. They got sued. They had to change their name. They had literally just started growing and it was causing them a nightmare. What did they do? They created an entire social media series on the whole process, and not only survived the name change, but thrived. The other one is Gymshark. Gymshark sells clothes, but if you look at their community, you would never think it's just clothes. So think of your customer base as a community that you can talk to. The more people feel that they're part of something, the more lenient they are if things do go wrong. And the third thing is calculate. So when you're starting to get busier and you feel like you're coping, just do some simple sums. Like, can you cope with 5 customers? What about when it's 50? What about when it's 500? What about when it's 5,000? As the number increases, you're going to find a point where it's going to start feeling tricky. You're going to think, oh, this number's getting too big. Now, that's normally because as a founder, you scale by thinking of what you can do, and you don't automatically think of hiring people, because you're taking the risk. You don't want necessarily to bring other people on that journey too quickly with you. But you have to think about bringing those employees in at the point where your numbers are starting to get too big. So ultimately, you can grow exactly the business you have in mind. You're likely to have to make some compromises and also shift your mindset to understand what it is you're truly trying to create. But definitely knowing what you're going after and understanding how to get there in the way that you want to get there creates the strategy that helps you achieve the business success you're after. So, any questions? Sorry, I think I went over the 20 minutes.
Lee, that was fabulous. You can take the screen down so we can see everyone clearly. Okay. Any questions for Lee? I see Gideon put a point in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just signaling I'm very with you with SMART goals. I've yeah, spent, similar to you, time in corporate life, and they are, well, yeah, one of the reasons I left, I think.
yeah, definitely. I was the line manager for many years and had to give SMART goals through very gritted teeth. So I don't get bothered with that now with founders at all.
Excellent. Question. I've got a question, Lee.
Mm-hmm.
How many founders would you say listen to the agile steps and apply what they learn?
How many work agile?
On sort of percentage terms.
Yeah, I think it's probably around 50-50. And I would say there's a demographic shift as well. So anyone who started their business pre-pandemic tended to start from a business plan, so tended to think of it as long-term strategies. Through the pandemic, one of the skills that has been adopted by a lot of founders is that agility. So during the lockdowns, we called it pivoting, but actually it's not just pivoting, it's working in a different way. And I guess because we no longer have that certainty of the way the world works, we still haven't really stabilized. People are quite concerned about going back to longer term plans. So I would say the ones that have been looking through maybe 4 to 5 years are more likely to have a more rigid view of what they're trying to achieve, whereas people coming through now tend to be a bit more flexible just by the nature of the environment that they're in at the moment.
And one additional question, founders come to you and they want to use your services. Can you often spot early on who you feel was going to be successful or not?
Yes, and a lot of it is why they come to me, because some people, so I've got one client who I got through Twitter because she ranted on Twitter about not being able to find someone who could tell her like what to do with her business. And I sent like the emoji of the woman with the hand up, and we started talking, and she had had several advisors who were in that kind of high ambition, high potential box. They were expecting her to kind of quit everything, sink everything into the business, but wasn't really giving her a practical way of doing it. And working with her from day one, she followed everything that I said. Everything got used straight away. Whereas there are other people who I've worked with, some of them through like the accelerators, where they come along, they want the information, but the next time you see them, they've done nothing with it. And it isn't necessarily about resources, it's not about timing, you know, they're capable 100%, but it's that mindset of if you're going to be given the rules of how to do this, how prepared are you to follow them? You know, I class myself as founder-led, so I am not someone who says this is the process, this is the only way to do anything. I follow them, but what that also means, if they don't have that drive to implement, we get stuck. And you know, I hope that I'm quite honest with them if I feel like they're not quite ready to do the mental part of running the business, which is, I'm not entirely sure this is going to work. I don't really follow what you're telling me, but I'm going to do it because you've done it with so many other businesses and it's worked. So it's kind of that faith thing. I don't think it's always down to building trust. Sometimes they don't trust themselves to do it, and that can be the biggest block.
Thanks, Lee. Any additional questions for Lee this morning?
I've got a comment, really, or maybe it's a question or a comment, but I've been I think I don't know if shame is the right word, but I've been running a lifestyle business. I'd say that's when I started my business in 2010. It was a lifestyle, and in many cases it still is. And it's not a kind of shame is the wrong word, but it's not a very kind of, it doesn't feel like you're running a proper business if it's a lifestyle business. But it has very much helped me and live the lifestyle I want to live in terms of being flexible whilst the kids are growing up and stuff. And now I'm really ready to sort of turn it into something more than that. So I'm interested by your take on lifestyle businesses and how actually they're okay,
Oh, 100%. They make up a very large proportion of business owners, right? If you consider Companies House last year calculated that the average age of a company is 8 years, right? They are not companies that are being built for long periods of time. They are companies that are getting people through having young children, having periods of redundancy and unemployment, and they're running a business in between times. It is really hard to run a business, right? You only have to have a partner who has a full-time job with someone, and you realize that you've been up at 2 a.m. trying to think about the next thing for your business, and they're moaning that they've got to get to work for 9 o'clock. You're like, we both have our battles, but it's a different battle. And no matter how big you want your business, taking the step to do this by yourself is huge. And I think it's appropriate that people who have that kind of lower ambition when compared to the people who are talking about taking over the world, they get the same advice. Because in that, and Gideon, you're a perfect example of it, in that are people who, once the necessity has passed, they still see why they want to be here, and they do feel more capable of making it bigger. So you can't dismiss them, but absolutely, I have been to so many networking events where you have people talking about, they've pitched to 10 different accelerators and they've done all these amazing things, and they're going off to, London Tech Week and all of that. And they say, so what do you do? And the other person's like, oh, I just look after myself. And I think you're right. The word is shame, because the ethos around startups is sometimes too heavily focused on everyone wanting everything. And actually, the businesses that keep our economy going are those ones that are doing it for much more personal reasons. And so I never dismiss a lifestyle business, but I think you have to allow yourself to sit in that space so that you don't get that shame of not wanting something bigger. It's fine. It's where you should be.
Thank you. That's good to hear. And it doesn't have to be like that forever.
Exactly.
I love Gideon's point on that, because the amount of people who contact you because they perceive you're like a startup or a business, you want 10,000 leads a month, Yeah. I wonder why you don't want to engage with them, or you don't want to somehow find 30 grand each month to pay them to do it.
Well, exactly that. I mean, if you talk to lead gen companies, they all assume quantity, and actually you may want that, but again, you may just want to find the right people for you. When I talk to people about social media strategy, they say, oh, I need to be on social media and get 100,000 followers. And you say, you're a hairdresser in Bexley. Like, where do you need 100,000 followers from? You just need the people around you who can get to your hair salon. We just have to be more realistic. And I think I really notice this now, because my strategy work is very personal. I work with very few clients at any one time. But Advisor is this online platform, which is the other end of the spectrum. It's all about quantity of people on the platform. And I noticed the difference in the mindset that I have to produce on each. One of them, I don't want a huge amount of demand. I want the right demand. And the other one, it's looser, because it's not needing to have that more personalized effect from me. So knowing what type of business you're trying to do can help you sometimes back away some of these companies that are trying to sell you services that in the heat of the moment, you might think, well, maybe I do need them, but you don't, because they're going to give you something that ultimately goes against what you're trying to achieve.
Also, another reference to Sinclair the C2, was it? The electric car? Which
yeah.
probably is of its time now, but it was about, what, 40 years too early?
I know. Well, this is the thing, you know, it was a cool idea. You know, and if you look at the City of London now, where it's buses and cycles only, Sinclair C5s would have been absolutely brilliant. But he didn't have the audience, and everyone thought he was just a little bit strange for thinking of it. You know, time and a place sometimes, rather than a bad idea.
I see one recently, and it looked still contemporary and modern, I thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he was before his time. Lee, that's been fantastic.